Guys, I'm back talking about Knight Silksong. Why? Because this game has been absolutely dominating my life for the past several days. Now, I did make a video a few days ago talking about my overall impressions of the game, and I did recommend it, and I still feel exactly the same way as I did in that video, but obviously after a lot more time with the game, there's a few more things I actually kind of want to discuss with the game, and that is actually about the difficulty that the game is offering. I feel like difficulty in video games is kind of like getting brushed over a lot in this day and age, thanks to the Souls series and the whole Souls-like formula that is going on in this day and age, and I think that's a bit unfair. I don't think it's like normal to just turn around and tell everybody to like get good because like they're struggling at a video game or something like that. I mean, I've played a lot of hard games over the years and I love my challenges. I mean, some of my more like things that I consider hard in video games, like beating stuff like Ninja Gaiden 2, the original on Xbox 360 on Master Ninja, you know, like stuff like that was incredibly difficult and challenging. And I've only ever done it a couple of times in my life because it is actually that hard. I'm not someone who wants to become someone who knows the ins and outs of the mechanics of the game to trivialize it in that regard. But as like a challenge, there's so many like things in video games I've done. I've played like strategy games on their highest difficulties. Some people say they could never beat some of these games, but I enjoy that aspect about them. So I'm kind of like giving you a little bit of a resume of the fact that I have beat a lot of games on their hard modes, and I do understand, I think, what makes video games challenging and what makes other aspects of video games challenging. So I'm not just making this video for the sake of it. I think like having a discussion about things like this is completely valid and fair. To get on to the topic about Silksong though, I do think there's a lot of players that kind of just dismiss the hard versus tedious aspect of games. There's a huge difference between hard versus tedious. Yes, you've got your hard games that are fair, and then you've got things that are actually just tedious for the sake of being tedious. And I'm not saying I'm not enjoying Silksong, but there's a bunch of stuff in this game that is just tedious for the sake of actually being tedious. I brought up in my last video about the unnecessary time it takes to get from a bench back to the boss. The boss runbacks are absolutely kind of crazy in this game in my honest opinion, and I honestly don't think Dark Souls or any of the other games were half as bad as what Silksong has done to people in this game. In my honest opinion, yes, there was boss runbacks in some of the games and some could be unnecessarily long, but almost every single one in Knight Silksong is unnecessarily long. And this is not hard in my opinion. This is just creating a tedium of hopefully catching you off your guard because you're frustrated about dying the odd couple of times, and then you die along the way, getting frustrated, dying to the ads that are all over the levels. That's honestly what the game is doing, and it makes you wonder what the developer really wants like people to think while playing this game. Are they just like, well, you can just heal back, it doesn't really matter? But like, do you honestly want like people seeing the same hallway several times on their runway back to the boss? It make them hate the boss fight. That's actually like the unnecessarily bad effect it can have on bosses. It makes you just like no be happy about even beating the boss. It's just like, well, I'm just glad that area is like finally behind me and I'm not even caring about the boss at this point. Because in my honest opinion, I genuinely don't think any boss in this game that I've fought so far, all the way to Act 3, was really difficult, because their patterns are really easy to recognize in this game. What I do think can be hard about the game, in all honesty, is the run backs to the bosses or the gauntlets, purely because of the fact that you have to kind of like pray a little bit to RNG with some of the gauntlets. And that's because if you're fighting like 4 enemies on screen or something, everybody's going to kind of struggle with like 4 enemies on screen. I have died mostly in this game to just like gauntlets where there's like 4 enemies on screen and I need to micromanage a bunch of RNG. Not the actual bosses themselves, because like I say, I think the bosses' patterns are crazy easy. The only way the game really feels like it can kill good players is to create unnecessary tedium through some of their gauntlets and their runbacks, in my honest opinion. And I don't think the developer should have went down that road personally. I think he should have balanced that aspect of the game better, in my honest opinion. And I think maybe the runbacks to the bosses, maybe let's say half the bosses should have had like a save bench right next to them. Not like 80% of them have 5+ minute runbacks. I think that would have been a lot better for the game, and you would have made people enjoy fighting your actual bosses a lot more. I'd love to hear what people actually think about that aspect. I don't think this game is too hard personally from a skill point perspective. I don't think it's even remotely trying to be, but I do think it's purposefully went out of its way to create a tedium to kill better players, because that's really the only thing the game has. And I do think that is kind of like bad design. That's what I would honestly say. And you know, I've been watching like a bunch of higher tier streamers over the past like week and a half as well, and a lot of them are not even playing this game anymore. And some of them are just took a look at the game and turned around and says, you know, I think I can't be bothered playing the rest of this game because it's too similar to the first game kind of thing. Now, I've not played the first game to actually comment on that, but I think it's completely valid that they've felt like that, because a lot of these gamers are skillful and have done hard things in games, but they've took a look at Knight Silksong and just went, yep, I'm not even remotely going to invest time into this game because it's kind of no even respecting my time in a lot of aspects. And I 100% agree that it's no a get good mentality they need or anything like that. It's a completely justified reason not to even play the game. Another thing that's happened over the past couple of days is that there's going to be a patch for the game that's like nerfing the early game, which I actually find kind of funny if you like think about it in this aspect. Why do you think they're like nerfing the early game in particular? Because as far as I'm concerned, the early game's not any harder than the middle or late game or anything like that. The only reason I think that they might have done this is because if someone is interested in trying the game or something like that and wants to buy it, the early game is going to be deceptively easier from this point on, and people might think they stand a chance who are maybe not as good at games or something, but in reality, they're being like lured into thinking the game's going to be a wee bit easier when later on they might not be able to do some of the stuff. And this is all done, I think, to help prevent refunds on Steam from hitting like the under 2 hour mark. Because honestly, if that is the mentality behind it, that's kind of insane. I'm 50 hours deep into this game, and I'm finally on Act 3. I would not still be playing this game if I wasn't actually enjoying it. So I just thought I would tell you that I am actually enjoying this game. It's not like I'm trying to rant on the game or anything like that. But when it comes to the tedious aspects of this game, you'd have to be like crazy to not think some of the mechanics and stuff that has happened in this game is created just to absolutely frustrate the player and possibly inflate its runtime in some degree. That's personally what I believe, and I would love to hear what people think about this take, because there's a lot of people talking about the difficulty of the game, and I like talking about difficulty in video games. You know, I'm a firm believer in, you know, that some games should have difficulty modes, actually, because if it's up to me, you know, it doesn't really bother me. I always would play on the hard mode anyway. So making easier modes in games just feels like it makes it more accessible to gamers who are not as good. And I think that is completely okay. I do think we will see difficulty options in a lot of video games in the future, and I think it's probably the right way to go, because that means we might actually have like more challenging things in some of the easier games that come out in this day and age. Think about it from that aspect. Dudes, thanks a lot for watching the video. I'd love to hear what people think about the difficulty in Knight Silksong. Cheers for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.